Good evening. On behalf of our festival co-directors, Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, and my colleagues at Teamwork Arts, I welcome you to this session of JLF Words Are Bridges, now back with a new season. The second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in India has caused enormous pain, suffering, and loss. We hope we can provide you all with some strength and succor with a series like JLF Words Are Bridges that celebrates the indomitable spirit, diversity, and richness of Indian languages and international languages. We bring to you a plethora of original work, their translations, and an insight into each author's unique world. This series reinforces our vision to ensure the free flow of knowledge, information, and ideas to you during these troubled times. Ladies and gentlemen, we present today Elegy for the East, Dhrubajyoti Borah in conversation with Trisha De Niyogi, with insights by Atreyee Gohain and Shantana Saikia. Assam is the melting pot of cultures with a rich and diverse literary heritage. The famed Assamese writer Dhrubajyoti Borah talks about his recent Elegy for the East, a story of blood and broken dreams, and his other books and writings. Rooted in the contemporary histories and the experiences of the people, this narrative is a quest for peace in the midst of ceaseless physical and psychological warfare in conflict-torn Assam. In conversation with publisher Trisha De Niyogi, Borah talks about his books, translations, and the process of self-translation. He is joined by Atreyee Gohain as she shares her experience of co-translating Elegy for the East, and Shantana Saikia as she shares her journey of translating this icon of Assamese literature. Dr. Dhrubajyoti Borah is one of the finest writers and intellectuals of Assam who has written more than a dozen widely acclaimed novels, 6 collections of essays, travelogues, books on popular history, and monographs on history, language, and nationalism. He has also written extensively on the current socio-political topics of the state. He has been awarded the Sahitya Akademi Prize for his novel Katha Ratnakor and a Times of India Lifetime Achievement Award for Literature, amongst others. His writings have been translated into English, Bodo, Bengali, Hindi, and many others. Dr. Borah is a medical doctor by profession, a professor of medicine, and the principal of 3 medical colleges, besides being the director of medical education. Trisha De Niyogi is the Chief Operating Officer and Director at Niyogi Books, an independent publishing house in Delhi. She began her career with publishing in Sage Publications and has come a long way since then. She was a fellow at the Istanbul Fellowship Program 2020. She is an advisor to multiple organizations, including the Heritage and Education Organization Heritage Shala, an initiative for promoting Indian literature, the Purple Pencil Project, and the diversity and inclusion platform Belong. Atreyee Gohain translates from Assamese to English. Her interest in translation developed as a trainee editor with Katha and deepened with her stint with Rupa as a fiction editor. Her translations of the work of reputed Assamese authors such as Mamoni Raisom Goswami and Imran Hussain have appeared in Indian Literature and News India and in anthologies published by Penguin and Oxford University Press. Shantana Saikia is an associate professor of English at Bahona College, Jorhat, Assam. She is also a published author and an ethnographic researcher. She has written her doctoral thesis on oral literature in the religious institutions of Assam and has extensively curated, presented, published, and delivered lectures within and outside the country. We are delighted now to welcome our wonderful speakers for today. And now let's begin our session, Elegy for the East, Dhrubajyoti Borah in conversation with Trisha De Niyogi, with insights by Atreyee Gohain and Shantana Saikia.
The original novel, Kalantarar Goddo, is a part of a trilogy based on the tragedy of Assam in view of the separatist movements and their effects on the state thereafter. Your critically acclaimed works also include writings of the Second World War, the French Revolution, and the Russian Revolution in Assamese language. So it seems revolution is a recurrent theme in your work. What inspires you to delve into this subject?
Now, Trisha, look at this in this way. Let us go to the words of Dickens. Revolution is supposed to be the best of the times and the worst of the times. The best of the times because this is the time when it brings out the best in people, whether it is courage, whether it is sacrifice, or whether it is collective heroism. It brings out the best in the people. And it's the worst of the times because it brings out violence, it brings death, it brings so many sorrow and misery. But within all this, the human spirit, it expresses itself better. And you can have that an insight into the humankind in a much better way. Therefore, these upheavals, the revolutions have always attracted me, and I have tried to see about the existence of man in such situations of conflict, mainly.
True, the indefatigable spirit of mankind is something that we have seen right now as well. But as humans, we also look for happy endings and peace. So in this particular novel, you tried to showcase the sensitive issue of the separatist movement of Assam. However, though you portrayed the insurgents with empathy, the resolution of the entire drama suggests that the authorial support is for a peaceful Assam as an integral part of India. Would you like to comment on this?
You see, it's something like this for me. The violence and hatred do not lead us anywhere. In the long run, if you look at it, violence and hatred don't lead us anywhere, nor it solves the problems. And it further that has brought in India for all of us. And I don't want this beautiful compact to be any way weakened. But at the same time, a lot of different people go to make the entity of India. We have to take care of every one of them. We have to take care of various races, religions, various parts that make up India. And they do have some really, really genuine problems at times. And these have to be addressed. And our state has many ways failed to do that. That is why we have all these problems of violence and everything coming up. But violence, I don't believe in it. It solves no problem. It leads to no solution.
True. And while we talk about violence and revolution at this point of time, your book is very important in time and space at this point of time in Assamese literature.
I will tell you this in this way, that people are hugely dissatisfied with the Indian state for a variety of reasons. And because of this dissatisfaction in Assam, a section of our youth did go underground. They have started believing in violence. Non-violence have lost its voice. And because of this has happened mostly because of the failure of the Assam agitation. And when violence came, there is always a counter-violence by the state. Terrorism, counter-terrorism. And it's the common people who have suffered most in this atmosphere of terrorism and counter-terrorism. So, how to deal with this? Because it's the people of flesh and blood like you and me who are living through all this, and my efforts have been to bring them up.
We would like Professor Atreyee Gohain also to say what made her feel that she would like to maybe work on this project with you.
So I was asked to share my experiences of translating Kalantar Gaddo by Dr. Dhrubajyoti Borah, now Elegy of the East, I remember reading this novel when it was first published in serialized form. There was a favorable buzz around the work and a lot of anticipation regarding the installments. So I was very happy when I was called upon to collaborate on its translation. This novel is a powerful and an important testimony to a crucial chapter in Assam's social and political history. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion on that point today evening. But what I recall most as a translator and a reader is the way this novel privileges the lives of common families trapped in the crossfire between the state and the insurgents. As a reader and as a translator, I was deeply affected by the sense of terror and the underlying apprehension that shadowed the pages that dealt with Prabhat and his family's encounter with the state security forces. The author does a remarkable job of showing how this fear stalked the normal day-to-day lives of the Hazarika family, and also the parents' sort of sheer helplessness and pain when they were confronted by the impersonal state machinery that threatened to engulf their son. The scenes of custodial torture were perhaps the hardest for me to translate, and these have a resonance even today. I'm aware of this novel's long and sort of arduous journey towards being printed in English translation. So I'm very happy that this journey has ended now. This novel definitely deserves a wider readership, and I'm proud to be associated with it in whatever limited capacity.
Yes, absolutely. That's the power of literature. Now we'll go forward to the translation aspect of your novel, of your novels. Now this is a little tricky question. Please pardon me for this trick question to you at this point of time, but I would like to know more about what you feel about translations by an author himself. It is often said the dynamics of translation of a novel by a translator and by the author himself makes a lot of difference. In the novel Elegy for the East, though you have a co-translator, still you have contributed a large portion of the translation. One of the major complaints about Tagore's translation of his own poetry, despite winning the Nobel Prize, is that he sanitized it to make it more acceptable to the Christian audience. So what is your take on this as an author, on the actual practice of translation?
You see, Trisha, I always believe that if an author can do it, it is always the best. That is what I feel as an author, because it then becomes much more truer, and it portrays, it depicts the nonsense and the things that I as an author wanted to depict. We have had a lot of very, very good translators, especially I'm speaking of Assam. They are fine, correct, perfect, but at the same time, their language, you may call it, if not Elizabethan, it's Victorian English. And this is not what goes in the market or readers like it. So you have to be aware of all these things. We have very less number of good translators. So if the author can do it himself with little editing and help, I think that is always the best. That is my feeling.
Yes, of course. But again, my question remains, what about, what if at some point of time you feel that it could be better, it could be slightly different? Would you make those changes in the original manuscript?
As an author, I would not like to make changes. But it usually happens more so when there are translators. Because their understanding sometimes is very different from what the author understands a particular situation to be. That is the problem mainly.
So, would you like to tell us a little bit about how do you work with your translators? What is the process?
See, it is only on this book I had a translator, co-translator, Atreyee. But in subsequent books, I have not, and I don't have a translator. I translate it myself and then leave it to the editor to make it possible.
Okay. True. But then let's understand a little bit more about the translation between languages. Now, my next question is going to be slightly longish, but it is also important for me to understand. It has often been seen that the translation among Indic languages is a natural process. For example, translation from Assamese into Bengali or from Bengali into Oriya can easily happen without much change in the syntax of idioms. However, when the translation happens from one language family to another, the question of change of syntax and idioms, and more importantly, the cultural specific expressions get involved. So in transferring these cultural mores of Assamese literature into an alien language, what kind of strategies you apply? Do you sometimes feel compelled to compromise with the idioms of the target language?
You see, my feeling is like this. Each of the major languages are capable of expressing all kinds of thought, however complex it may be. So, you must not be enslaved by words. If you go by words and try to stick to the words and its meaning and its context, then you are in difficulty. When you are changing from one language family to the other. But if you are not enslaved by the words themselves, but take it to the meaning and try to convey the meaning to the author in the target language, there is no problem as such. So many of these problems of the change of cultural context, of compromising, are more mechanical in nature than actual. That's what my feeling is from translation.
Namaskar, I'm Shantana Saikia and I have translated Dhrubajyoti Borah's Assamese short novel Hope into English, which I have titled Hunger. I would like to begin by thanking the organizers of this festival for having me over here. It's a pleasure to speak on this book. I had read Hope quite a few years back, and to be truthful, I was very uncomfortable with it. The deprivations, the degradations that dehumanizes a person is depicted so starkly here, so dispassionately, that it affected me very hard. And particularly because the book talks about a community of marginalized people about whom we don't really know much, or we have never really tried to know much. So when the author Dhrubajyoti Borah, he asked me to translate this work, I thought I should give it a go. So translating any work is a challenge, and this book was no different, although it's very short, this novella. And I had to keep quite a few considerations in mind, but I will speak only of two here because of the constraints of time. The first was the author's depiction of the social and the physical landscape of the Chars, Sor and Sapori, as we say in our language, Assamese. They're so unique and they have a life of their own. And in this narrative, they are almost co-actors. We need to understand this reality to understand the central character, Farmad's life, his passivity, his acceptance, his gradual dehumanization. So I needed to be very careful about that because this was not a first-hand experience. I have never seen a chart, and I had to be true to the author's vision. I wasn't particularly worried about the human emotions because I knew that would resonate with the people would understand. But this physical and social reality was something I had to be very, very conscious about when I was translating this work. And next, of course, the language. The language is so taut, so stark. There's such control over it. At times it's so clinical. I would like to give an instance here. In the first few pages, when we see the symptoms and effects of hunger on a human body, when he describes Farman, maybe because the author is a doctor, it's so clinical that I had to be careful there also, because I could not let it degenerate into sentimentalism. The language, the flow, the starkness, and also the disassociation keeps pace with Farman's passivity. And it's only towards the end when Farman's outbursts come, when he bursts out screaming, it is only then the author lets go of his control of the language also. It bursts, kind of. So I had to be very careful of those things. There are many other issues also, many things which I would like to discuss maybe at a later time when I have more time. I have taken a few liberties here and there, exercising translator's autonomy, but that would be another story. So these are the two things that I would like to speak on, that I have spoken on, and thank you so much for having me over.
And so my next question is very specific to that. In Indian languages, and most of the Indian languages have their origin in Sanskrit. And there are a number of endearing relationship terms. But to change them into one-size-fits-all English, sir, madam, dear, destroys the local flavor again of the language. I would like to know how you and your co-translator in this book actually negotiated the challenge.
You see, it's same. You don't get enslaved by words. For example, say in Assamese, a father's brother is called Khura. You see, it has got no equivalent word in English. Only a general term of uncle. It may be your mother's brother, it may be your father's brother, mother's elder brother, father's elder brother, younger brother, all this. But we have different names from this. So in translating, you write the language in such a way that without using Khura or the younger brother of my father, you have to put that in the construction of the language itself, which bridges many. I won't say that it will bridge 100% of the problems, but mostly to make the text readable and make the text approachable to the reader, you have to do these tricks. So we don't get enslaved by words and their specific context in the text.
Got it. So would you like to read something from the Assamese version of Elegy for the East, actually the original version of Elegy for the East, Kalantare Gaddo?
I would read a little. See, in this book, there was a village widow who was raped by armed forces. The rape apart, what type of social problems did occur after that, including making the victim to atone and to give a feast to the village so that the society can take her back into its fold. All these things happen. So I'm reading a little of that. কোনখন চৰকাৰক ক'ব লাগিব দাদাইদেউ, কোনোবা এটা হঠাৎ ধেমেলীয়া সুৰত সুধি পেলালে, দিল্লী নে দিছপুৰৰ? ৰহ হাজলামি নকৰিবি। দাইটিয়ে ঠিকেই কৈছে, চৰকাৰক ক'ব লাগিব, প্ৰশাসনক ক'ব লাগিব, SDOক লিখিতভাৱে জনাব লাগিব। কথা পাতি থকাৰ পৰা হঠাৎ আঁতৰি গৈ দুৱাৰৰ কাষত মাষ্টৰনীক ফুচফুচকে এজনে ক'লে, মাষ্টৰীণ বাইদেউ মোৰ জোকাৰি সন্মতি জনালে। ল'ৰাটোৱে শেষত কলে, গা ধুবলৈ নিদিবি মাষ্টৰণী, গা ধুবলৈ দিলেই শেষ হব, একো প্ৰমাণ আৰু নাথাকিব, আমি সোনকালে যি পাৰো কৰো। কিবা এটা কৰাৰ সিদ্ধান্ত হোৱাৰ লগে লগে গাঁওখনত আকৌ হুলস্থুল লাগি পৰিল। বহুতেই কথাটোত তৎক্ষণাৎ সমৰ্থন জনালে, কিবা এটা কৰিব লাগিব, এনেই এৰি দিব নোৱাৰি। আন কিছুমানে কথাটো শুনি বৰ দুধুৰ মুধুৰ অৱস্থাত পৰিল। কিংকৰ্তব্য বিমূৰ হৈ তেওঁলোকে একো মাতিব নালাগিল। বুধু মহাজনৰ গেলামালৰ দোকানত উত্তপ্ত আলোচনা চলিল। মুখেশ্বৰ খাটোলা, ঘনকান্ত চৰকাৰ, লম্বুবায়ন উত্তেজিত হৈ পৰিল। গাঁৱৰ ল'ৰাবোৰে এইটো কি কৰিবলৈ ওলাইছে মহাজন? খাটোলাই সুধিলে। তোমাৰ কথা বাৰ্তা শুনে অকপ, তুমি কোৱাচোন বুজাই কথাটো। মনে মনে থাকিলে নহব, গাঁৱৰ কেলেংকাৰী এতিয়া নিজে ৰৌজাল বৌজাল কৰিবানে? Will you let the scandal of the village, will you tell it about yourself? Then the last part I am reading. গুণাৰাম পাঠকে নাম লগোৱাই মচুৰমাহ আৰু খোৱা তেল কিনিবলৈ আহি গোলাত সোমালেই। মহাজনে কথাখিনি তেওঁকে কলে। তুমিয়ে কোৱাচোন পাঠক, আমি এতিয়া কি কৰা উচিত? পাঠকে কিছু সময় চিন্তা কৰি কলে, ভাল বিপদত পেলালা মহাজন, পাপ লুকাই নাথাকে, জানি কৰা পাপো পাপ, নাজানি কৰাটো পাপ, মুঠতে পাপ পাপেই। পিছে নাজানি বা মনৰ বিৰুদ্ধে কৰাটো দোষ কম। সেয়ে মই কওঁ, তাই গয়াৰ আগত আঁঠুলৈ পৰাচিত হওক, ৰাইজে তাইক উদ্ধাৰ কৰি লব। আমাৰে জীয়ৰী, আমাৰে বোৱাৰী, আৰু আগে পিছে কোনেও তাইক বেয়াকে কোৱা কথা নাই, তাইৰ কথা বেয়াকে কোৱা নাই কেতিয়াও। গিৰিয়েক মৰাৰ পিছত তাই কেনে কষ্ট কৰি বুঢ়া বেমাৰী সৌৰভক প্ৰতিপালন কৰি আহিছে দেখিছাই। ধৰ্মত থকা মানুহ, তাইক আমি সকলোৱে উদ্ধাৰ কৰি লম।
So I've got the corresponding English translation open in front of me. So I'll read that out as well. The discussion grew more intense. But for any redressal, won't you need something first? What? Won't you need proof? Proof that the incident has occurred. Nobody is going to believe us otherwise. But how are we going to prove it? As far as I know, there has to be official evidence. There should be a medical examination. Think about it carefully. Remember that incident in Lokhimpur that had appeared in the newspaper? That was proved by a medical examination. The government should be told. The old man almost screamed. The boys were startled. Which government, Dadai? Somebody asked, a little lightly. Dispur or Delhi? Don't you make fun of him. He is right. The government should be informed. The sub-divisional officer should be informed in writing. A young man left the group, went up to Masterni and whispered something. Masterni nodded in consent. The young man told her, see that she doesn't have a bath. Baidu, that will be the end of all proof. We will try to do something as soon as we can. Before a final decision could be taken, the village was in uproar. Many people agreed to what had been proposed. Something had to be done. The perpetrators must not be allowed to get away with it. But a few people were confused. There was a heated discussion in Budu Mahajan's grocery store as well. Mukteshwar Satola, Ghonokanto Sarkar, Lombu Bayan, and a few others were present. They got excited. What are our boys about to do, Mahajan? They listen to you. Talk to them. Are they going to town about this scandal, spreading the scandal of our village all over? Asked Satola, one of the men. That's not a nice thing to say, Satola, said Mahajan, adding, don't talk about it as if it is a scandal. You and your family may be in trouble in future too. People must speak up. An innocent woman has been tortured. This can happen to anybody in any house of the village. What are you saying? Alright, let's not call it a scandal, but this is shameful. It is one thing to say she has been touched or pulled by the hand, but once you let a doctor examine her, it will be public knowledge. Think about it carefully, Mahajan. Everybody should not be carried away by what a few youngsters say. Well, I've done my bit, so don't blame me later, Satola spoke, as if with great sadness, and walked out. The rest were silent. Satola said something very seriously. Budu said to the rest, and we can't ignore him altogether. What if you go and report to the government and those monsters come the next night and shoot us all like dogs? Even if we keep quiet, the underground boys will catch hold of us. Either way, we are trapped. Do you know that what Shambori has become? Asked Nareshwar. He walked up to Budu and whispered in his ears. She has got a promotion, Mahajan. She has become a martyr, a living martyr. Shut up, what rubbish. Don't bring all these things to your foul mouth, Budu bristled. Gunaram Pathak, who used to read Bhagavad Gita after the prayers at the Namghar, entered the store to buy masoor dal and oil. Budu told him everything and then asked, Now tell me, Pathak, what should we do? Pathak thought for a while and said slowly, You've got me into real trouble. A sin does not stay hidden. A sin's a sin, regardless of the intention. But a sin is lighter when it is committed without your knowledge or against your will. I think she should atone, because as of now, she is a fallen woman. She should undergo a prayachitya, atonement, and after that, atonement by prostrating before the villagers. The villagers will take her back. She is our daughter-in-law, and nobody has ever had a bad word to say about her. You have seen how devotedly she has been serving her old father-in-law after her husband's death. She is a good, pure woman. We will take her back into the fold. The men present exchanged glances. That's for later, Pathak. We will consider that in time. But what do we do now? The question now is whether we ought to report it to the government or not. Don't drag me into these matters. I know little about the government's work. I have given you suggestions about lifting her from her fallen state and taking her back to the fold. Now it is up to you. Discussions continued in small groups. Finally, it was decided to inform the government in writing and request for corrective measures. But since it was already night, the trip to the city was postponed to the next day.
Thank you, Trisha. You have read so nicely.
Thank you. But I actually, while reading this part, I felt a bit angry at the same time. As a woman, I felt like the challenges that we face every day in women, we may not face so much in the urban setting, but there are countless women who go through these things every day in the rest of the country. And so this was a very moving portion which actually moved me thoroughly, and so that I think that came out while I was reading the portion. But before we end, I have one last question for you. Now, in the last two decades or so, a host of writers in English have come up from Assam and other parts of Northeast. Some of them who have made national fame are Dhruba Hazarika, Aruni Kashyap, Siddharth Dev, Mamang Dai, Temsula Ayo, Easterin Khire, Janvi Barua, Mitra Fukan, and many others. Even as a humble reader, I've noticed that their portrayal of reality is quite authentic. How do you consider the impact of these writers on the general reading public, and how does it compare with the traditional impact of Bhasha writers?
See, this is a very important question and also sensitive in nature, because two things. These are very excellent writers and they have written very beautifully. Their depiction of the reality and the situations are excellent. But there is a great divide between them and the Assamese reading public. Because these books in English are read actually by a very minuscule portion of the Assamese reading public. So the common reading public do not have them, and they are not available yet in Assamese translation. So people have not been able to, except for the elite section who reads both languages and wants to read these authors. There is a disconnect, which is unfortunate, because these are beautiful, very good writers, eminent writers, and they've written beautifully. And if these writings are available in Assamese, also in translation, I think it will enrich the total fabric of Assamese literature.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the translation, and congratulations for that. I hope we will get to read many more of your translations in the forthcoming years. And thank you very much for taking out time today and talking to us. It was an insightful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Trisha.
Thank you, Dhrubajyoti Borah, Atreyee Gohain, and Shantana Saikia. It has been an absolute honor and pleasure for all of us to have you here and to hear you speak. Trisha De Niyogi, thank you for your excellent anchoring and moderation. Thank you for your insights into the art and craft of translation. And as always, thank you all for being the most appreciative audience ever. As you're all aware, the grave repercussions of COVID-19 have set us back in ways that we could not have ever imagined. In our efforts to help the arts recover from the devastating impact, Teamwork Arts launched Art Matters in 2020, through which we've been providing awareness and succor and some resources to the artists across India who've been affected by the pandemic, and developing support channels for them. Our efforts have helped raise over rupees 7.5 million, and over the past year, we, in collaboration with our partner NGOs, were able to help 5,200 artists and craftspeople in need across the country. With the onset of this vicious second wave, artists and artisans across the country again face unprecedented and heartbreaking challenges. We have launched an emergency fund to provide them with a range of resources, from food and rations to healthcare and medicines. You can contribute by pressing the contribute button on your screen. As always, stay safe, stay double masked, and see you next Thursday for JLF Words Are Bridges. Good night.